People with HIV, okay, they go to a church picnic in Ohio, we're told, don't bring any food to the picnic unless it's cellophane wrapped, and we want to make sure the cellophane is on it when you show up. And so the hostility that exists in our culture towards people with this virus is for many of us in these urban areas, we're quite protected, but out in the nation at large, it's a very difficult situation.
The fact is that there are those of us that now can't get life insurance, can't get mortgage insurance, are being discriminated against because of the fact that we were diagnosed as having a disease and we could live now for 50, 60, 70 more years, but because of the fact that maybe we went out on disability or whatever, we were diagnosed as having that disease, we cannot do anything about it. I can't get a mortgage because of it.
I'm colonized with a Pseudomonas, and I've had this for about 15 years, way before the HIV. And that's the only problem that I've had, other than, you know, I keep getting infections because I'm colonized. And just recently, when the CDC expanded the definition of AIDS, now I have AIDS. You know, and meanwhile, I've been dealing with this for like 15 years.
I'm a retired chef. I lost my job because of my disease. I don't even want to say disease, because of my illness. My lover didn't want me anymore. I lived very, very well. I lost my job, my lover. I had to move. I moved twice in 6 months.
I found a woman and spent some time with her, and she tested positive after me, and we split up because of that, and I lived on West Harlem. So here I am. I went from president of my own corporation in New Jersey to a bike messenger living on 136th Street with rats and with a broken leg, well, broken kneecap, and living on $400 of disability because as a bike messenger I was an independent contractor and I had no means of employment. So I started digging in the garbage for 5-cent nickel deposit cans out of the garbage and to refund them to supplement my income. Being totally healthy the whole time, despite a broken leg, and I thought I was going to die.
I was referred to a doctor who advised me to go on AZT immediately because if he could keep me alive for 3 years, he almost was guaranteeing me that there would be a vaccine. I did go on the medication, and I had no side effects. I handled it well, but I just was something in my body was telling me not to take it, don't take it. It wasn't political, it wasn't anything that I read, it was just a feeling that I had. And I did discontinue taking the medication, and my T cells remain up there in around the 1500 range.
Upon my first diagnosis, I was given a prescription of 1,200 milligrams a day of AZT, which now, by the way, we realize causes horrendous things in the body, and that was it. So I did the nucleoside run, did everything they tell me to do. Everything made me very, very ill. Now, when I first got to the doctor, I really wasn't that sick. Then I started getting sick, and I said, well, this cannot be right. My body does not want this.
When I first was diagnosed, the doctors were like, well, I want to put you on AZT, and I said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to live my life. I don't want to die. And I feel like I've made the right decision.
I was surrounded by 3 rubber-gloved, white-coated clinicians at Bergen Pines Hospital in Bergen County, New Jersey, and was told that early intervention was of extreme importance, that not doing anything was folly. Well, after protesting about 3 times in a row, I bolted out of there and prepared to die.
When I started taking it, I broke out with herpes inside my mouth, inside my nose, all over my lips, and it was like all I wanted to do was sleep. I didn't want to get out of bed. I had pains. I knew going through the detox of drugs my body well enough to know that AZT after several weeks was horrible for me.
I am taking AZT, and I'm taking acyclovir. I don't like it, and that's what brings me here, to come back to the fundamentals
of taking care of my body and my mind together.
It wasn't until '89 or so when this real shaky research I felt came through saying that if your T4 cells have gone below 500, you should be on AZT, and the implication was that people who chose not to do that were being irresponsible.
Everything they'd given me didn't work, and they gave me a new name. They labeled me nucleoside sensitive. So there's a genre of us that are nucleoside sensitive. So what do you do now? You know, I can't take their drugs. My body didn't want their drugs, you see, but that was fortunate that I really took that as a good sign. And I knew, and this was my advice to just everyone, take control of your treatment. Educate yourself about your body. It's your body. They don't know how you're feeling. They don't know what's going on. All of the medication in the West, you know, it dissolves you in one part of your body. It may help you in another.
I started getting sick around 1985 after I was exposed to defoliant C while in service. I got 2 tests done. Both were inconclusive. Then I came down in a series of about 12 different opportunistic infections. Thrush and candidiasis, and what they thought was KS, and 3 bouts of PCP pneumonia. And those who tell you can't survive PCP pneumonia are full of crap, because you can. Just can't take cortisone when they offer it to you, or pentamidine. And I was lucky enough to be in ACT UP when ACT UP still had some muster and anger to it back in '85 and '86, and started taking a look at what was going on at the NIH and the CDC, and flipped out and was scared out of my mind because there's nothing coming down the pipeline from them.
The people who follow the advice of the so-called experts, the doctors, the AIDS expert, they get sick and die. It's almost 100%. And yet wherever you find pockets of long-term survivors and people who are at risk in staying healthy, they've taken charge of their health.
None of us anticipated the AIDS epidemic. By 1984, all of the friends that I knew and loved had died. And I was still around.
From the experience of my friends who've died having used AZT or any of the other pharmaceuticals that doctors love to prescribe for AIDS, I've also read a lot of information about AZT. I understand it's very toxic. I would never take it. God willing, I will never take AZT.
I would say that approximately 70 to 75% of my friends are no longer around. 4 years ago, I had perhaps one close friend. I've always been very gregarious, and I always had a good support of friends. And for 3 years, up to 4 years ago, I was stripped out of all my friends because they all died. So all in all, I've known probably like about 15 people. So that's a lot of people for one person to know to have died of this.
I felt when I first was diagnosed that this was a signal for me that I really had to change my life and that I didn't have a choice anymore.
I made a decision that I could look at this as being a victim or look at it as another one of life's adventures, and I decided to look at it as an adventure.
When I was diagnosed, my first reaction was nausea, and then the next reaction, I can honestly say that, was a feeling that I am not going to die. I am not going to let myself die. You know, if there's anything at all that I can do to contribute to, you know, to my being healthy and my future, then I was going to try and find out what it was and do it.
The first change I made was I faced death, you know, more than once with drug overdoses and such, but I decided that I really wanted to live, and in doing that, I decided to do anything and everything that was possible to make sure that my life would be full. and that I would enjoy the moment because it was too precious.
How do you help them find people who may have not tuned into their own inner voice, their own power, their own spirit, face this challenge? And I don't think there's any question that marshaling the forces of the immune system, marshaling the will to live, promotes health. People might just challenge it, but I personally can't. There's just too much evidence of people just getting a grip, commanding their lives, and living longer, and making something of this, the challenges presented by AIDS.
I decided in 1991, January, I will never forget it, I changed my doctor that insisted on me taking AZT because that's what they told them. And I changed that, and I changed a lot of things, and I took my own power back.
I started doing a lot of reading as far as reading my own blood work, so I knew what questions to ask my doctors. Many of my doctors got frustrated with me. They would, you know, tell me they're the authority, that they know that not to get caught up in this, but I always wanted to know. And I fired quite a few doctors.
Came to heal, and thank God for Mike, because I started calming down. And I started realizing that getting arrested every week or so with ACT UP wasn't working, and that if I stopped being so panicked, I could start taking control of this.
Clearly, over and over again, people come to our meetings and say something very similar to what he said. I'm feeling better than ever. AIDS was the best thing that ever happened to me. When I heard that the first time, it gave me a headache. I couldn't understand how someone can say that. But then you hear it over and over again, and you carefully understand what's being said. What's being said is the people were empowered. They took charge of their lives. The whole way of living, it's more than simply their health, but their whole relationship to their life has changed. And it's one where they're ready, willing, and able, and reliant on themselves to do whatever they need to do.
I really don't put a lot of energy into worrying. I live my life. I have a good time. I'm active in a lot of organizations. I'm on the board of directors of God's Love We Deliver. I do a lot of service work, a lot of volunteer work, and that's really is what my life is about. I also teach, and I also enjoy doing that.
It's given me a new life, a new outlook, a freedom. I mean, I get goosebumps when I think about it, because I'm happy. I mean, I'm happy to work with people that are worse off than I am. And believe me, we can all stop and think a moment.
Is there any hope with AIDS, or is it just sit back and let the people die when they die? I have to say that, you know, the research is, Michael Callan interviewed more, he himself is a long-term AIDS survivor, more long-term survivors than anyone else, said that if there's a characteristic that these people have in common, long-term AIDS survivors, it's grit. He said these people didn't just think that life was worth living, but life was worth celebrating.
It's been a real wonderful experience for me, not having AIDS, but just as far as my life. I'm an ex-addict. I have been clean for 6 years, and just by changing my life, by exercising, by juicing, by taking vitamins, by just being positive, has turned my life around tremendously. I feel wonderful. I feel great.
Because of these changes, I have not had a single opportunistic infection since I've been diagnosed. And I don't know how many years before that I was carrying the virus, but I've been very healthy. People tell me all the time how good I look, and I never hide my status from anyone. I'm in the public. I'm a business entrepreneur. I'm an antique dealer, and anyone I discuss this with, they're always interested in my input on what I've done to myself, because they tell me I always look good, and I continue, and I firmly believe in the practice of preventive medicine.
I just have no time to have AIDS. And as far as labeling, you know, the labeling of AIDS, one by one I've been peeling them off and peeling them off. And it's the very insistence that I'm ill, and I refuse to be ill, and I don't look ill.
Every day I get up and I sort of start over, and part of what I tell myself is just keep an open mind. You know, you don't know what's going to happen today. It could be anything. And I try to bring that attitude to my work and to my healing as well. because the world is full of miracles, and they could happen at any moment.
Yeah, life is an extraordinary gift. This is a part of a journey for me. And I feel like I'm walking on water. We all are. My doctor said to me, whatever you're doing, he said, keep doing it. So that was a shock to me because I thought he was in charge. Well, I'm in charge. And so wish me luck.